So, I mean, I think basically from the Russians' point of view, the whole world is their game board. And wherever they see a move, wherever they see an opportunity, they will move. And it'll be different. In the Middle East, they'll be trying to build friends and make themselves invaluable, whereas in Europe, they will be basically trying to undermine our will to continue supporting Ukraine.
President Vladimir Putin has said Russia has no plans to capture Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv. It's just over a week now since Russian troops penetrated the border region near the city as part of Russia's summer offensive. Putin claims the intention is to create a security zone for Russia's border region. The Russian president was speaking on a state visit to China, where he held talks with his ally, President Xi Jinping. And earlier in the week, Putin surprised many by demoting his long-serving defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, and replacing him with Andrey Belousov, an economist with little military experience. Mark Galeotti is the co-author of Downfall, Prigozhin, Putin, and the New Fight for the Future of Russia, and he's on the line. Hello, Mark.
Hello there.
What do you make of Putin saying that Russia has no plans to capture Kharkiv?
Well, look, I mean, we always have to treat everything that Putin says with distinct caution. But in this case, I mean, I think it's true, not because Putin doesn't actually want Kharkiv, but simply because, quite frankly, he doesn't have the troops to do so. Kharkiv is a huge city. The force he's got deployed is not big enough. So in some ways, he's making a virtue out of a necessity and sounding like a peacenik, when in fact it's just that he can't mobilize the forces to match.
So what's he going to do then, do you think?
I mean, look, this particular operation is frankly almost certainly an attempt to basically divert and distract the Ukrainian forces. At the moment, the Russians are really pushing mainly in the east of Ukraine, out of the Donbass region, and they're moving slowly. It's a slow, grinding, bloody fight, but nonetheless, they are pushing forward. I think they're hoping that with this incursion to the north, then the Ukrainians are going to have to transfer some troops to respond to it, because after all, they can't put their faith in what Putin says. And that will actually help out the operations to the east. So I think it's all part of the attempt to try and ensure that the Russians can make some progress this summer.
Mm-hmm. And talking of diversion and distraction, how much of President Putin's reshuffle in the last few days is style and how much is substance?
Actually, certainly I was surprised by how much substance there was to this. Particularly, you've got the new defense minister, Belousov, who, as you rightly say, doesn't have military experience. But then again, very few defense ministers do. But it's clearly the kind of guy you want in place if you're thinking that this is going to be a long, slow war. And therefore, you want to make sure that you have, in this case, an economist who can handle the economic dimension. In other words, to make sure that the money is there to buy the kit, to pay the soldiers and so forth. So it's all part of, I think, an overall process whereby Putin is really gearing up for a war that is actually going to continue to last for years, unfortunately, to come.
Mm-hmm. And if Russia is now integrating its country's defense and civil economies, what does this mean for the average Russian, for the services, for what they depend on from the state? Surely they're going to notice the difference. It's going to be less money to invest on their needs.
They are, in fact, going to notice the difference, which is one of the reasons why money is also being spent on the National Guard, which is the sort of main internal security paramilitary force there to crack skulls if people start to protest. I mean, I think this is really what we're seeing. And in some ways, it's eerily reminiscent of the 1970s, when the Soviet Union was this massive militarized state-controlled system that was also slowly grinding down into obsolescence. It's not going to be dramatic for ordinary Russians. It's just going to be that each year things are going to be that bit worse. And I think what Putin is counting on is that sort of this kind of slow grind downwards is not going to be enough to bring them out on the streets, because they know what's going to happen to them if they do.
Mm-hmm. And Mark, in your piece in the Sunday Times, which I found really absorbing, you say that Russia is now a permanently mobilized war-fighting state with profound consequences for the rest of the world. I'm just wondering which parts of the world are going to be most impacted by this, because Russia does have friends in China, in the Middle East, in much of sub-Saharan Africa, and elsewhere. So who is going to feel the chill wind of this?
I mean, in a way, I would say that, frankly, everyone will. This is in some ways kind of proxy World War I, in the sense that from the Russians' point of view, this is a global struggle against the West. It's not just about Ukraine. And therefore, they're going to be opportunistic. So where, let's say in Africa, there are regimes that are willing to work with the Russians simply for their own self-interest, the Russians are going to jump in. We've already seen that happening. But likewise in Europe, we are increasingly seeing actually the other side of Russia, the campaign of not just intelligence operations, but subversion and sabotage. Witness, for example, the recent arson attacks on warehouses in Leytonstone. So, I mean, I think basically from the Russians' point of view, the whole world is their game board. And wherever they see a move, wherever they see an opportunity, they will move. And it'll be different. You know, in the Middle East, they'll be trying to build friends and make themselves invaluable, whereas in Europe, they will be basically trying to undermine our will to continue supporting Ukraine.
Final question, Mark. In your forthcoming book, Downfall, Prigozhin, Putin, and the New Fight for the Future of Russia. New fight, who's doing the fighting? What kind of future?
Well, this is the interesting thing. Look, someone like Prigozhin, who was, let's be perfectly honest, a ghastly human being and a thug, but nonetheless, even he was beginning to realize the degree to which this regime is moribund. It doesn't have anything to offer Russia or the future of Russia. And so the answer is, in some ways, there's going to be lots of different forces. There are still Russians who are liberal, who are trying to do their little bit on some small scale against Putin. There are ultra-nationalists who think that the problem is actually that Putin is just simply a corrupt embezzler. You know, I think the point is there's lots of different people in Russia trying to articulate their views. And at the moment, we don't see them because Putin is keeping a lid on it all. But that doesn't mean to say it's not actually happening and those discussions aren't already happening.
Okay, Mark Galeotti, co-author of Downfall, Prigozhin, Putin, and the New Fight for Russia. You've got a big piece in the Sunday Times today. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on Times Radio.
Георгиевским крестом второй степени, младший сержант Рочев Евгений Васильевич.
Государственные награды. Родина высоко оценила ваш ратный труд. Надеюсь, вы и дальше будете также верой и правдой служить нашему Отечеству, служить нашей стране и продолжать те традиции, которые были заложены нашими предками.
Вы обнаружили патриот, едете патриот, который был сзади уничтожен. Поражение немецкой панцергаубицы 2000.
Ну, тоже боекомплект.
Так то есть заряжено было. Значит, мы пролетая сейчас делали доразведку, до сих пор горит еще.
Склад ГСМ горит.